So the next presenter is probably someone who you've seen before a couple of times. This is our CTO, Thomas. And his presentation is very exciting. It's about the new-ish version of Guillotine 7 and extension of your GraphQL schema.
Yeah. And like the title says here, it says Beyond Headless CMS. And this is literally what it is. I think few of you might have seen something like this before. Because what we're doing here is sort of the next iteration on CMS. And we think it's really cool. And you're the first to get the, let's say, live demo of it. And I hope you'll enjoy it. And we'll see how things go. So if you don't know Guillotine before, or have heard about it, it's basically Enonic's Headless API. And the name is because we take Headless seriously. And it's a GraphQL API, which means it's strongly typed. It automatically generates the API based on your content model. So whenever you define content types and other schemas, the API automatically reflects that. And it's available as an app on Enonic Markets, so you simply just install it and you get everything out of the box. And like pretty much everything else we're doing, it's open source. So if you're super interested, you can dive all the way down into it. And even if this is version 7, it is a major rewrite. We had to do a lot of big changes to make the functionality that I'm going to demonstrate work. So what are the big news? Well, it's essentially dynamic extensions. That's what we're going to focus on here now. So what does that mean? Well, we'll show it to you later in the demo. So what do I mean beyond Headless CMS and why is this important? The traditional CMS kind of tried to do everything right. You had the front end obviously inside it. That was a big part of the CMS, the rendering and the delivery, and then the content management, but also other things like, personalization and whatnot, right? And then came the era of Headless CMS, where the CMS was kind of reduced to just being a database. And it had some impacts, both on the editorial side, but also for developers. So yeah, you could use your favorite framework, but you had to also do a lot of work. So you got a much more responsibility. You had to reinvent a lot of things to make things play nicely. So what is the next iteration? I'm basically calling it Universal CMS here. And the idea is that it's the best of the headless world and the best of the traditional, where you get the functionality and the experience that editors like with the visual editing and these capabilities. But you also get kind of the ability to choose your own front-end framework. But the CMS is going to take a bigger role again and play a more, let's say, be more relevant when you're creating your sites and applications. And the big shift that I'm talking about here, and I'm going to demonstrate, is when here the CMS used to deliver HTML, right? And you could customize and deliver what you needed. Here you can deliver JSON, but deliver what you need, but also more. So let's have a bit more look at this. The headless CMS is typically like you have some authoring interface, some API, and then your content model, right? When you use, and this is kind of where it stops, right? You cannot adopt beyond these things typically. When you have XP, you have a whole platform, which means you have a back end you can control. So you have, in our case, the JavaScript framework, so you can code and run JavaScript server side, and you can deploy these as applications. You have security and the general storage and all these cool things you can use for virtually any purpose. So it's basically an application stack. And on top of this, you have Content Studio, and you have the Guillotine API and your own model, right? So when we put these things together, And especially now we focus on the Guillotine API. You literally have a digital experience backend. What does it mean? Well, it means you can have any kind of things like typically you have your own systems running your own data. Those can be kind of delivered through XP if you need to, of course. Let's say you have some price list here and you have products, and you can literally go through XP and get the correct price instantly, even if the price isn't stored in XP. So you can do it in one query. Or you could say, oh, I want to accept user-generated content. Or I want likes. I want to store likes. You can get them and receive them through the API, make your own data input objects, and you can persist them anywhere. But here's also the nice deal. You can persist them in XP, because XP has a general data storage. So you don't need to spawn up other services, other databases, etc. And of course, you can deliver to kind of in any format and any platform. So that's it for the slides. Now let's see if we can do a demo. So I'll start from scratch. I have Enonic CLI installed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a sandbox, which is a local developer environment, running everything on my machine. And we'll call it my sandbox, and I'm going to use this template called Essentials, so it will pre-install with some applications. So yeah, there is setting up the sandbox. And then I want to build my own app. And here I'm doing another command for that, creating an app called My App. And I'm using the repo tutorial intro and connecting it to the sandbox I just created. So yeah, that's done. And then I go into the folder, My App, Enonic, project, deploy. Okay, so that's going to start compiling. It takes a bit of time, the first iteration here, because of downloading half the world of NPMs. But when that's working in the background, localhost, I can visit the sandbox. So this is my running local version of XP. So this is the full platform, just like you would have if you were running a server in the cloud. And what do we have? Well, we have some shortcuts here to log into the admin. Hope you can see it. I can make it bigger. And these are the apps that were installed automatically when I set up the sandbox. And this is the one I just built, so which is ready now. And here are, let's say, the configuration files if you need to change any of the configurations. Good. I'll just skip straight into Content Studio, where I should now have some sample data. Yeah, there it is. So what I have now is just a very simple data set. So there are some movies, there's some pictures and some persons here. Let's see, Morgan Freeman here. Right, and some kind of built-in preview. Yeah, picture of Morgan. So we have some data. So instantly, because I have Guillotine installed and I have the super user role, I can actually start running queries instantly from Content Studio. And here I have a query that's supposed to, does a search for content with the text Morgan, and then checks the content type should be person. And maybe it's a bit small, but I can zoom it a bit out again. Yeah, and then we say we want some data. So we want to fetch the display name, and then we want to fetch the date of birth and photos. Maybe it's time to show you what it looks like here if I edit it here first. So here it is. This is the form for the content type of person. So you can see there's photos, there's some bio, and the birth date. So let's just focus on that. Going back, and we see what we're asking for. We want the name of the item, the date of birth, and photos. And photos is just a reference to another content, right? So we basically follow that reference, and then we say, yes, I know it's an image, so and then I want a URL to that image in a 400 by 400 version. Clicking play, and yes, I'm getting some data. So you can do more advanced queries like movies here, and then you can say, oh, follow and get the cast with actors and characters and stuff, so you can get more fancy data. But this is like the basic functionality. So the example I want to show you today is, or start with at least, is quite simple. So what I'll do is that you can see the date, birth date, right? But what everyone really wants to know is how old is Morgan Freeman actually, without having to try to calculate it yourself, right? And now it's a very simple example, but you can imagine you want some functionality on the server to deliver some more data, right? And in this case, we're just going to use the data we already have in the content. And here's the app I created. And then I have a samples folder here. I'll just do a quick trick here. And I'll move this folder into this directory. It's basically I'm creating a folder called Guillotine, and then I have a controller file here, a TypeScript file. So to extend and customize the API, essentially what you need to do is just add this file and start working. And you can add it in any app. It doesn't have to be in this app. It could be your other apps that will augment and sort of extend this API. And there are several things you can do to extend. In this example, we're going to do, let's say, the simplest trick. We're going to add a field. So you see here, it says add field. So the way to do it is to export and extensions. And then, in this case, it uses creation callbacks. And what is that? Well, whenever the schema, the GraphQL schema is generated, this function will be called, basically. So this way we manipulate and update the schema. So, okay, we add the field age, and we say it's a GraphQL int. That's nice. So now the schema will have a new field. By the way, we also say that we will do this for this type in the GraphQL schema, so the person data type. So you can manipulate existing types, create your own, etc. Right? And next is the so-called resolver. So the resolver actually implements what's going to happen when you ask for the data. So here we say, okay, for age and the environment in this case is basically the data, the actual content item. So you get that as an input, and here you see if there's no date of birth, return null, right? Else, do some calculations and return the age based on date, current date, etc. So let's see if we can make it work. So yeah, it's gonna chew through that, and while it's doing it, so an important thing to notice when you're working with the XP development now, there's Enonic Dev, which will just be a continuously build system running, like sort of like Tom showed. I will detect files are changed and compile and sort of make everything ready and run. However, when you build stuff for Guillotine, Guillotine needs to detect that an app has been changed. So you really need to kind of deploy the app again. That's at least how it works now. So that's why I use the deploy command. And when it has happened, you also need to refresh here if you want to get this query playground to understand what's available. So let's go to Morgan with image. And now I should be able to say age, right? So yeah, there it is. You can of course also, oh sorry, wrong key. You can do all this auto-completion stuff, of course. But I just want the age. So play. So he's getting quite old. That's the short version. And if we look at the other version here, you see where we're basically just going in and fetching the display name. I can then go and say data age here as well, right? Play. So now we can see age of all the different things. Oh, so, okay, this is a super simple example, but the more interesting thing is here, this could be anything, right? It could be data from another system, things you have aggregated and stored in XP, whatever you like. And it's not limited to just adding fields. You can override fields, create new types, and change literally anything. And to have a look at that, okay, let's see. Here. So this is all sort of the available things you can do. You can create enums, change the input types, make new interfaces, unions, etc., etc. So lots of functionality you can do to instantly augment your API. And I'm going to show you a bit more sophisticated example. To do that, I'll install some more test data. 2 new apps. So there I'm going to get some test data, and then I'm going to install the SEO Meta Fields app. So there we are. I now have a different data set, so I can switch to that. So in this case, it's a blog. And this one is using Enonic standard rendering engine. But of course, everything you have here is also available in the GraphQL API, so you can do the queries and everything. It's all data. So what can we do? Well, I want to add this SEO app, because SEO is important, right? Want to make sure that you get all the nice images when you share this and that Google works properly. So I'll add the SEO app to this site, apply, and then I'll configure it. So it has a bunch of different settings. I'll just do the fallback image here. And yeah, downloads, I think I have something here. Yeah, this is a nice fallback image. And what more do we want to tune? Now we'll set the at Enonic HQ Twitter card name, apply. So far so good. You can just publish it also to get it out there. So what actually happens? Well, first of all, this app adds another panel. So you can actually get a sort of a preview here, generic preview of what the app is doing. So yeah, this is going to be the fallback image for this page, because it's the first page on the site. And then here's the open graph data, here's the Twitter card stuff. Okay, nice. Also, you get another set of fields here. So basically, you can see how I can now override again. So this you get on every content type. So the app just injects new fields on all content in this structure. Nice. So I can dynamically extend, and you can customize even further on each item. And if I preview in this case, this is kind of the, let's say, the baseline behavior and how you normally maybe used for CMS to work. And then if I look at this, because in this case we know how everything is rendered, right? So you can see here, yeah, it injects automatically the meta properties and stuff, right? Because in this case, yeah, we know what's happening. But what if you're doing headless, right? Which is what we care about now. Well, we go back here. And here we have another query. So what this app does, it dynamically extends the API, but now here I'm looking for a query, just fetching the site, the front page, and then a blog post, right? Some buildings, okay? And then this field is brand new. So this didn't exist until I installed the app. And now I can just run this query and we get all these meta fields stuff generated for us. So you don't have to invent it, do magical queries to get that data or add custom settings somewhere else. It's instantly available and the front end can now start using the SEO fields. And as you can imagine, this is just like the basic usage of it. Sort of sky's the limit to what you can expose here. So we think this is a sort of a huge step in taking CMS in the direction it should be going, making it a dynamic backend for your front ends, basically. So that's what I had today. Questions? So this is what we're also doing with all of our standard apps now. It doesn't matter if you're using our framework, using Headless, you'll get kind of the same functionality and capabilities. And of course, you guys can build even cooler things.
And you know that on our site, Enonic.com, we're using Next and Headless, and we're using also the sitemap app and what Thomas now showed, the SEO app, and everything gets injected dynamically into the schema.
Yeah, so this is using what you've seen live now. So here we're actually using the same apps and site maps and whatnot, right? To do it. Yeah, and this is running Next.js now. Yes.
Two questions.
Okay. I know that sometimes we need fake data, not from we need authorization. Yeah? And for this, we use Guillotine IP. Have you realized already some security protocol when I can take data not only free to all, but also?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When you're running your code, let's say you're doing a query now, and maybe you're, let's say you're not authenticated, right? Then Guillotine knows this. It will execute in the context of whatever kind of permissions you have. So let's say I'm inventing a new field, okay, the secret field, right? And then the secret field, you can control everything, what happens behind it, right? You can even say, oh, there's some data here, which is price, and you're not going to show the price data unless there's something that kind of says you should, right? You're sending an authorization token or some other thing is delivered into your request. So yeah, you can do that, and you can also protect with virtual hosts. If you want to set up the API and protect it with virtual hosts, you can do that. You can set up auto login. And also in XP8, we're introducing something called service accounts, which means you can send just a token, and then you will be logged in as a specific service user. So there are several ways of kind of dictating this. But basically, Guillotine is sort of open. The API is open, but the data isn't necessarily open. So let's say I also produce a content item, and I say you have to be a member of the developer group to see this. That it wouldn't come out unless you actually have an authentication along with the request. So this is possible, yeah.
Another question in the back?
Yeah.
And that's a great feature to be able to add custom fields to the Guillotine API. But what if two different apps decide to add same field, for instance? So one app adds a field and the other app deletes the same field. What happens then?
Short version is that it's undeterministic. If two apps implement the same, let's say the age field, it will be random based on what has started, maybe first, last changes. Short version, don't do it. Don't introduce two apps that do the same. Try to do namespacing or some other way of making sure you don't step on top of things. And as you can see with XP, everything is sort of namespaced out of the box. If you have three applications with the same content type person, they will have a different name because the name is actually the app plus the content type. So you're basically in control of this yourself.